Hey, sometimes Google gets invalid bug reports regarding click-checking or cross-site request forgery. And here I have one. This bug hunter reported a click-checking issue on docs.google.com. Here's the URL, which lets the attacker change the profile picture of the victim. While changing the profile picture is maybe not the biggest security threat, is this maybe still a security issue? To understand this better, let me hand you over to the Reconless team and they can tell us more about this topic.
Hey there, this is Reconless, a web security YouTube channel created by file descriptor, Ron Chan, and me, Ed Overflow. Google tasked us with creating a video on the many non-issues their bug bounty program receives regularly. In this episode, file descriptor will cover unrealistic clickjacking and cross-site request forgery scenarios. Enjoy!
In web applications, many actions are triggered by clicking something, from liking a tweet to sending money. A malicious website can use the iframe tag to frame another website, then put an overlay on top of it and disguise it as another button. When the victim clicks it, they will actually be clicking the button on another website underneath without knowing. This is the basic idea of a clickjacking attack. It is easy to mitigate this threat, and modern web application frameworks have already done it by default. Websites can add the X-frame options or content security policy header to prevent or limit which websites can frame them. From time to time, you'll see a web page is missing those headers. You might be tempted to report it as a clickjacking issue, but before doing that, you need to know there's a few scenarios that are actually non-issues. The most common one is when web pages are static. They are usually the landing page, developer documentations, or microsites. Even though they may be frameable, there isn't anything you can click that performs an action. In other words, there is no security impact. It is not to say if it's not static, you should report it. Ultimately, it always depends on the impact. Let's say there is a button to subscribe to a newsletter, and the page is vulnerable to clickjacking. You could pull off a clickjacking attack and annoy the users by making them subscribe to an unwanted newsletter, but the attacker isn't really getting any benefits. In this case, this would be an accepted risk, meaning there is an impact, but it's not enough for the company to invest resources into fixing it. The same principle also applies to low-impact CSRF issues. CSRF abuses the fact that browsers automatically attach cookies in cross-site requests. If website A doesn't validate the authenticity of the request, website B can perform actions on behalf of the visitor on website A. Let's look at an example. Many websites have a sales form. You fill in some info like the name, phone number, and email address as contact. You'll often find them vulnerable to CSRF. But again, there isn't really any impact. Filling the form doesn't require being authenticated, so forcing a victim to submit a form with your info is the same as submitting it yourself. Talking about this, you should be aware that actions that require knowing a secret also fall into this category. For example, CSRF on resetting the password. This action usually requires knowing the password. But if you know the password, you may as well just log in with that password. Okay, enough about CSRF. Let's get back to clickjacking. The second common scenario for non-issues is when a clickjacking attack involves unrealistically complicated steps. Say, the checkout process when you buy something. Usually, you need to choose the payment option, delivery, whether you want the item wrapped as a gift, and so on. Not only is it taking multiple clicks, but the victim may also need to type something during the attack. Is it totally impossible to exploit it? No. Would the victim fall for it? Probably not. However, determining if an attack is realistic is subjective. For example, you could create a point-and-click game that hides the buttons. This significantly increases the chance the victim would click multiple buttons. Similarly, you could convince the victim to type something using a fake captcha. The keyword here is creativity. This video does not intend to serve as a definitive guide. Again, determining the difficulty to exploit and the impact of a bug is a subjective process. In most cases, the examples mentioned are not going to be accepted as valid issues. In some cases, and depending on the business impact, they might be valid issues. It's important to communicate with the company without the expectation that the report will be accepted. After all, you need to put yourself in the victim's shoes. Would you, or other people, fall for those exploits?
Thanks, Reconless. So let's try to apply what we just learned to this report. First of all, the impact is very limited. Changing the profile picture is not really impacting customers' data. So it's not really a security issue. Maybe Google would want to fix that, but maybe it might not be seen as a security issue and it wouldn't qualify for a vulnerability reward. But what is more important here is that it only affects Internet Explorer. The page did actually prevent click-checking through setting the CSP header, but this only protects modern browsers. Internet Explorer does not support the CSP header, so only Internet Explorer users could be attacked. So impact is already very low. But even more important is the fact that Internet Explorer is not even supported by this web application. So no user could ever use this web app with Internet Explorer in the first place. So in the end, this issue is unfortunately not a realistic attack and generally invalid. Sorry.